Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Why We Roll, the tabletop role-playing game chat show from the Stillfleet studio. As always, I'm Chris Pickett, and I'm joined by my co-host, Wythe Marschall. Hey, Wythe.
Hey, what's up? It's me.
Usually, then we say something like, "It will always be me." But
Ipseity.
yeah, today we're excited. We're sitting down to chat with the father-son duo Tom and Bodhi from Homie and the Dude. They are currently working through a Kickstarter for a product called Scorched Basin, but they put out a lot of other stuff, really fun, really interesting. Hey Tom, hey Bodhi, how are y'all doing?
Hey man, how you
Dude,
doing, Chris? How you doing, Wythe?
glad to
Good,
be here
good.
with you guys.
Yep, yep.
Yeah, super
Yeah, thanks
super
for
honored
joining
that
us.
you guys have had us.
We're here.
Yeah, we made it. Dad, we've been searching you guys out for a while, and we're glad we finally made it.
Yeah,
We're glad
yeah.
we finally made it.
We're glad time
Well,
zones
thanks.
didn't
It's very
interfere.
flattering.
Yeah, no, it is very flattering. It's great to have you on the show, and thanks for time zoning with us. This is why we're recording
course.
not at our usual time, Monday nights Eastern, but on a lovely Sunday at noon. So thanks a lot for making the time.
No, appreciate you
pleasure.
guys for taking the times out of your lives to talk to two jabronis from the UK. I appreciate that a lot.
So yeah,
I
maybe
guess one of my favorite terms, jabroni. So good.
yeah,
So
definitely
good.
feels like a traditional thing said a lot in old Albion is jabroni.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
maybe we could take a second and get to know you first, just as people. So Tom, Bodhi, can you just introduce yourselves and tell us sort of who you are before we get into your game work?
So what our tagline is: we're Homie the Dude, a father and son TTRPG content creation team. Underneath that, yeah, we're father and son. We decided that we wanted to explore how we could find some sort of creative vehicle around COVID time. And we actually started with a podcast like your guys, and interviewed all manner of people: athletes, actors, tattoo artists, skateboarders. It was a real wide swath of people,
Yeah.
including TTRPG creators. And we started. The analogy we used is it was kind of our method was kind of like a snowplow, and we needed to start changing it a little bit more into an arrow. So as we started kind of off selecting different genres, we started narrowing down to TTRPGs, and that was really kind of I guess, a decision based on your experience playing when you were younger, and then me consuming some early stage Acquisitions Incorporated during lockdown, and we just loved Acquisitions Incorporated at PAX and just how they interacted, how their improv was great. Chris Perkins was just holding court, the audience participation.
Patrick Rothfuss, who you hadn't read Name of the Wind at that time.
Yeah.
We didn't know anything about Name of the Wind, so we're like, oh, who's this hilarious dude
Yeah.
who's really great? And yeah, that just gave
That was
us
the
so
launching
much.
off point.
Yeah.
And then from there we ran the starter set, Lost Minds of Fandelver, with our family group, and then started really interviewing some people in the TTRPG space. Really had some hands up to lift us into different spaces of kind of contemplation on how we could maybe do this as something that was more than a hobby. And we tried our first Kickstarter in August of 2023 called Sky Zephyrs. That was kind of an answer to Spelljammer at the time. Spelljammer had just come out from Wizards of the Coast, and they still hadn't addressed kind of vehicle movement, and certainly not vehicle combat. And so we were running an AP at the time.
Yeah, I basically, so I'm our forever GM basically, and so my first homebrew world was a world of floating islands. If you picture in your head like the Avatar, not the last airbending type, the blue people type.
The James Cameron. The James Cameron.
Yes, exactly. So we had these floating islands, and I scoured the web at the time for mechanics that allowed us to move between the islands with some sort of vehicles. And there was, Star Wars 5e that existed at the time. There was Ghost of Saltmarsh. There was Descent into Avernus. There was the Wildjammer supplement that existed that the community had worked on and things like that. So I did a bunch of research, and I found that there was not really a method that felt clean or succinct or kind of all brought together. And so I started developing it just in my spare time for fun for our like home game and the actual play that we were running. And then when Spelljammer came out, which, you know, I'm like, oh my God, they're finally making it. I'm going to be able to run the thing finally. And then it came out and it was just so terrible. It was just so bad. And so we were like, okay, we want to see it in the space. Other people want vehicles in their game. So let's start with airships and we'll give it a run. And so that's when I designed the Sky Zephyrs vehicle mechanics that we kind of did for 5e in 2024. And yeah, it's been then just snowballed from there.
From strength to strength they went.
I wish that was the case. Yeah. But yes, it was a fun journey, you know. And that was my first foray into proper game design and things like that. And I've done a lot of homebrewing and a lot of, you know, coming up with new features and items and whatnot for our players. But that was then the first step into, you know, this is going to be a couple 100-page book filled with predominantly mechanics with, you know, the additional flavor bits of NPCs, creatures, items, and like features and things like that. We didn't include any setting or any location or adventure or anything like that. Basically, we just gave them the core mechanics for it.
That's fascinating to design around the vehicles, because I think that'll come back. We'll get back to this with Scorched Basin.
Yes.
So there's this kind of through line of your work of like, what about cool vehicles that just aren't really in the canon of the medievalisms, as Chris and I have talked about the show, the kind of generic backdrop of the D&D sort of extended universe. There's a lot of things that are mechanicalized, that are thought about. And there's even like skyships mentioned, I feel like, on a lot of podcasts and such, but there aren't always satisfying rules. So it's interesting that you were like, this is kind of an opportunity, right? It's kind of a big opportunity to fill a gap. And then, as you said, you can design around it. Who are the NPCs? What are the encounters that happen as you're falling off of whatever, a dirigible, a floating submarine, whatever cool thing. So I'll be excited to see how that translates to kind of the Mad Max, like Basher universe. But please continue walking us through the Homie and the Dude, you know, world.
And that was in the year 2023. Yeah. And then, so an offshoot from Sky Zephyrs was the Wandering Tavern. The Wandering Tavern was actually included in Sky Zephyrs as an STL, a giant island-sized airship that people could kind of get on and enjoy. And what we found was there was a bit of buzz during the Sky Zephyrs campaign, the Kickstarter campaign, about the Wandering Tavern. And we actually had a stretch goal to make an STL of the Wandering Tavern. So it's this kind of larger sized mini for this island-sized airship. And so as we're going through the campaign, we're continually having conversations about, wow, they really like the Wandering Tavern. There's something about the Wandering Tavern that is striking a chord in the community. And so after Sky Zephyrs, we were like, what do we do next? And it just kind of organically pointed towards, I guess, maybe the Wandering Tavern. That's what's speaking loudest right now. And that is, that was the inception of what we call our plug and play systems, which is you can drop the Wandering Tavern or float the Wandering Tavern by any world that you play in, and have your players kind of jump on the Wandering Tavern and have some fun in there for a session or 2 sessions or whatever. Or it was so big, there's 17 layers of battle maps on it, and there's locations, and there's numerous NPCs and plot hooks, and it just grew and grew to a over 200-page book that you can run an entire campaign on there. And we've seen numerous people do that in our Discord, and they share their experiences on what has occurred on the Wandering Tavern. And that was our second Kickstarter, and that was in May of last year. And then after that, we put it to our audience and said, hey, what should we do next? And we did, the choices were some sort of like Atlantis underwater setting. The next one was a sort of sci-fi setting. And then the third one was desert, and I think we specifically mentioned like Mad Maxy, Dune-y, and the consensus was, why don't you do both? Why don't you do Mad Max and Dune, mash them together, and let's have something in the desert? And that's what we ran with about 1.5 years ago. And here we are, 300 pages later and halfway through our Kickstarter campaign.
whole lot of hours of lives later.
Yeah. My God. Well, before we get too into Scorched Basin, I am curious, Tom and Bodhi, like, what did the process look like going from having this kind of like homebrew idea, right? Of like, okay, well, we want this vehicle movement. We have these kind of like specific desires that are not being met by what's being published already. What it looked like to take that and then to turn it into the first couple of books.
It's a great question. I think, everyone who is a GM and homebrews their own stuff knows that feeling of like, I got some gold here, they're like, this is the next greatest thing since sliced bread, is the kind of energy that a lot of GMs come to it with. And I was obviously no different in my naivety and my and my early GMing experience and things. And what it was, I didn't realize I had a love for mechanics and the way that systems worked and things like that, predominantly until kind of halfway through Sky Zephyrs and kind of at the point where the OGL crisis happened with Wizards of the Coast. I then started playing a bunch of other systems, started kind of just developing my knowledge of the space in a few different ways. And it just changed me into this person who I fell in love with. How can I use mechanics to turn something that I would love to see happen in the game into something that we can play at the table and can have guidance or, as they say in parts of guidelines, kind of vibe for how to play the game. And so the way it started for me, the core concept of Sky Zephyrs and all of our vehicle movement is we wanted it to be this very real game of almost like vehicular chess with your GM and your players, where the GM can control a couple of vehicles and the players are controlling their vehicle. And what it becomes is this thing where movement happens simultaneously in our system. So at the end of a turn, all of the vehicles move simultaneous. So there becomes an element of trying to predict what everyone else is doing and trying to, almost find the trajectory of their route. So if you want to ram someone, it's got to be something that happens circumstantially because you guys cross paths. And that could be a bad decision on your behalf or a really good decision on your behalf, depending on your kind of motivations. And so like one of the things that we have in the system is it says, GMs, you can keep your movement to yourself and let your players keep their movement to themselves. And then when we get to the movement section of the turn, let it play out and see what kind of weird and wonderful chaos comes out of your players trying to, make insight checks across, the sky and try and predict things and all that good fun. So that was the core concept. Was I wanted it to feel like a dogfight. I wanted it to feel like we're chasing them, like we're on their path. They're going right, so we're going right. Trying to really find that. And I grew up with Tom showing me things like Star Wars. And those X-wing, sequences in space were so. I love that stuff so much, and I love the treasure planet whipping around on those sky surfers and things like that. So it just made sense to me. And then from there, it was the question of how do you develop three-dimensional movement on a two-dimensional plane? How do you incorporate modularization in so people can build, their own airships using different parts and stations? And then essentially, then how do you calculate the basic statistics of the ship itself? And that's kind of the path that I ended up walking to get to that place. And we used that for Sky Zephyrs, and then the Wandering Tavern was kind of based in that system, but we included more vehicles in with Wandering Tavern, the actual book itself. We included a bunch more vehicles in with that one. All of them have this, you talked about, we see it sometimes in fantasy, in D&D, they talk about skyships, you've got Eberron, things like that, that exist with skyships. But ours are this unique steampunk kind of style that have blimps, they have fans, propellers, they often look like galleons or like, versions of that kind of thing. We do have nautical things for those who like, do want a Treasure Planet vibe and they want their grand sails on their gorgeous, ship that's flying through the sky. So we do have that kind of stuff. But we just love that steampunk stuff. Often if I do ever run fantasy, it usually somehow ends up with me being like, I'm just bored of no one knowing what time it is, so someone can have a watch. A watch has been made. I don't like. Let's not do the looking up in the fucking sky and doing this horse shit.
Yeah.
Like,
there's so much tech creep. I actually really enjoy that about GMing, and again, the general medievalism of RPGs, where no matter when you set your game, there's always like that question of like, the hour of the day, this is the hour of the pig, which in our time would be a 3-hour blind. And you're like, no, it's 3 p.m. Like, I don't care. It doesn't, like, let's give them a 7-day week just for, like, the number of days, like, how, okay, if you're going to have some sort of downtime activity and it takes a number of weeks, like, for the player management, because I think that's where you move between levels. We've talked about on the show before. As a recap, there's kind of the exogenous, like, are the players happy? Is anyone hungry? There's the kind of level of, I forget the technical names, but there's the middle level of, like, we're playing a game and there's a strategy to the game, like you're saying, so let's make it feel like chess. And then there's the diegetic. My player character knows it's the hour of the pig on week 8 of the 13th month of the whatever. And it's like, I think it's fine to just be like, sometimes you literally change those levels and you add new Nova into the world. You're like, now everyone has watches. Why? Because it's easier and it doesn't change anything else and it's fun. I will say, I also think steampunk is cool, but I really like much more diesel punk, which I think is more kind of the Mad Max thing. So I think there's an interesting slippage between, and even with Studio Ghibli, if you go all the way back to El Porco Rosso and like these kind of, castles in the sky, like Nausicaä especially, they're not like, Nausicaä is more like fungus punk, right? It's like things are, it's not really steam, and I think it's getting away from a colonial tradition and a specifically English and American kind of imagination of alt future, and Nausicaä really opens up new visions of that. And I think maybe partially because it's in Australia, the whole Mad Max kind of extended lore opens up a different vision of like what ifs, and so it's really cool to think about using some of that and starting actually in a way with the mechanical design, but also what it implies for both the lore, like what NPCs are driving the other ships or the other cars, or not just the lore, but the like, are my players having fun playing a chess-like thing on a battle map? And so I think that's cool that you kind of took an essential insight and went a couple different directions design-wise. So it wasn't just in sort of adding a watch to a game, but coming up with a whole world of ideas. It sounds like, if that's a more or less accurate.
100%. I think the watch thing is very much one of those where I like to just break fantasy sometimes, because I feel like classic high fantasy has been done so much and it just hurts my soul. I'm also dude, put the word punk at the end of it and I'm there, whether it's cyber, diesel, steam, solar, you put punk at the end of it and I'm there for it. I think that's such an awesome genre that explores, and the exploration of technology. I love, you look at things like shows like Arcane, for example, it's magitech. It's not just technology or magic, it's technology in magic or magic in technology. And I think combining and playing with that mix of stuff, I think, Brandon Sanderson's another person who does so great at playing with that space of technology, magic, how they fuse together, how that kind of looks. Same with Star Wars, like in some ways, the way a kyber crystal works scientifically is literally
it's magic.
Exactly, the equivalent of being like,
magic.
well, you point a wand at something and say some words and something comes out the end of it, kind of thing. So I think that's a space that I really love exploring, and I love exploring what technology, even if we are playing low tech, what tech would exist in low tech? Like, are carts, are we just talking the standard 4-wheel pulled by a horse situation, or is there a better way that they've done this and designed this to make it more interesting, a little bit more developed, and have a little bit more to it? So yeah, I don't know. I definitely enjoy exploring that space as well as a creator. The tech level is important, I think.
And that continued. Yeah. I mean, with Scorched Basin, it was like, as you were saying, Wythe, it is a through thread of, and I'm not sure if it's going to continue, but it is consistent with our first 3 books, the vehicular commonality across the books, and so in Scorched Basin they're called bashers, but they have a similar fundamental feel to them. There are parts, there are stations. There's an amalgamation of, you can put these things together in kind of any way you want. So steampunk has fans and sails and balloons and all this stuff. Bashers, they're picking up scrap from all over the basin, and they're making all manner of vehicles that are smaller little oneers, all the way to big war rigs, that are, essentially the mutation of like 5 or 6 different vehicles.
Monster trucks with semi trucks that have had disgustingly long and big children. That's exactly the vibe.
Specifically disgustingly long and big. I'm curious, for the bashers, it begs the question for me, like, outside of, vehicular combat and movement and all of that good stuff, it feels like it also calls for rules around crafting them, around like creating bashers, taking pieces of one, putting it into the other. Is that something that's in Scorched Basin as well?
So great. By the way, you guys are crushing it with questions right now. These are awesome questions. I'm loving it. I'm absolutely loving it. So the answer is bashers. So our whole system is modular. So you could take any part or station that we've kind of presented in the book, and you could recombine them into any kind of order that you so please. So if you wanted, a vehicle that is designed for ramming, take anything that is giving you like that physical damage, that's giving you a buff on rams, that's doing anything, to that kind of physical contact aspect of it, very much so. However, with building it, that comes down to, I think it comes down to the flow of a game. And I think that's a lot more up to the GM than it is someone like me who's writing them a book for them to decide. So for example, if a GM wanted to allow their players to go and procure parts and scraps that they then need to build a part, and that becomes the quest, that becomes the story or part of the story, the pre-heist or whatever it might be. Fantastic. However, some GMs also just want to do a time jump and be like, cool, you guys want to do this. So in a week's time, you guys have built that. Good times, no problem. Let's move on, kind of thing, dependent on the pacing of your game. And so I think it's entirely up to the GM how the players construct the stuff. We've given them like essentially guidelines again of like, you can have this many parts and stations. They should be this many confrontation, this many foundation, this many propulsion, so on and so forth. And you can kind of, build it. The other thing that I think is really awesome that then ties into this is the riders as a faction themselves. The way they operate is they're the only people who know how to build bashers. They have this lost technology that one of the early people, surface dwellers as we called them, kind of discovered and made. So they all actually tattoo the blueprints of their vehicles on their bodies, so that if they crash or wreck their vehicle, they can just rebuild it by looking at the blueprints that they have on their body. But this is a sacred thing. This is something that, you only have your tattoos on your body. You don't let anyone else see your tattoos. It's something that's very, very private to you, basically. Furthermore, there's like the Ship of Truth where the original basher designs and blueprints exist for the riders as well. So using those tools of as players build a part and station, why not add a thing where they can tattoo it onto themselves using an item we have in the book called a tattooing kit, which gives them the ability to bake a memory. The actual mechanics of it is you tattoo a memory onto your body that you can never forget and you can instantly recall information from. So there's layers to, cool, you could start building it if you wanted to find the parts. Then you could get the tattoos that are the parts that you've built. And then if you wreck it, you could rebuild it. And yes, so it could work for sure.
Well, let me just underscore. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, no, there's also another element to the bashers and to the riders in that they're I don't know, their core spirituality is around speed. So, and that's how they gain almost like the equivalent of nirvana or enlightenment or that type of thing. If they can jack the speed up high enough, then they can, I guess, release enough endorphins to attain this evolved state, right? So that also contributes to how fast can we make these things? How crazy can we make these things? Yeah. Which also contributes to just the flavor of the bashers as well. Yeah,
and if we have a lot of races, in the basin. So for example, the riders hierarchy is determined by one race that goes all the way around the basin once a year. So there's a new rider king every year. Well, it might be the same person if they win a couple years back to back or things like that. But essentially, it comes down to your placement in that race is how much food you get, what your resources that are distributed to you.
Interesting.
And then if you are famous, so if you are what's known as a speed demon, you're one of the more popular people, you will then have a crew on your vehicle or a convoy that follows you, and then you distribute your resources to your convoy. So people will have 20 vehicles helping them win the race or trying to help them win the race, where other people will just be a singular vehicle of like maybe a couple of people trying to win it. So there is elements of like, cool, are you designing your vehicle for hunts and to do things? Are you designing it for combat against other tribes? Are you designing it to be the fastest racing vehicle you could, or the most versatile racing vehicle you could possibly design? You know, so there's lots of, you know, fun things like that, you know, ways to go and bust into like the Dune Eater's nest. People do runs to where the giant worms are and try and steal stuff from the giant worms area, but it's dangerous because giant worms, and so yeah, there's loads. Well,
I wanted to underscore some of these because I really like some of the integration of lore and mechanics and kind of the player experience, which I think are often, you know, you can approach separately, but I think that's a mistake. And I think what you're doing is cool because, you know, for one, it's cool that the organization is this like reimagined feudal or like neo-feudal state, but around racing. So it's kind of like Mad Max, like Tron, like there's certain other fictions where it's almost like there is nothing but, you know, it's the Ricky Bobby thing of just go fast. You know, the Hippodrome, there was this lame Hippodrome show about, you know, saddle and sword stuff in Constantinople and Rome back in the day. But it's like, I think it's cool to have that for a D&D like experience where it's like going fast determines your whole social world, but as a player, you can actually fight against that. Maybe you're not fast, and that's a cool choice that a player could make about their character. Or, like you said, you want to go hunting, you're more interested in kind of the ecology, you're sort of an outsider who doesn't participate in the like weird go fast obsessed, you know, like main culture. But I think it's interesting that you're giving people those narrative options, and then they also have specific mechanics, which are kind of, it sounds like sort of more downtimey in certain ways, and then when you're in the moment, very tactical and very, you know, crunchy and fun for combat with your sort of vehicle to vehicle combat. I also think it's interesting that there's this idea of building them being something you could kind of have a crafting mechanic. I tend to think those end up being some of the lamer mechanics in RPGs, and I like the idea of narrating it and pulling from more the tradition of where we've gone with powers. You know, they're sort of powered by the apocalypse original insight of like a power can just be a thing that happens, and then it's a description or it's a question for the player, how does it happen? So like how did you build this? Like how did you add that 13th engine so it has, you know, it's like a dune buggy with 13 huge engines at the front or something, you know, like how did you get it to stay together given the stats? We agreed on the stats for it. Instead of making you roll, like describe it. And I think it's cool to kind of set up those moments as flashbacks. And we've done some racing with our game Blister Critters, where you're little fucked up little mutant animals in the eco-apocalypse. And like, it's fun to ask people in the middle of a race. Like, it's like, okay, everyone gets one cool thing they can add right now because, you know, it's the big ending, and we're going to give you a moment to add an ability to your vehicle and go around and ask people to have a flashback. The kind of, I love the Fast and the Furious movies. And I always say, like, what is that moment when it's like the night before the race, you know, and the two of you are having a conversation, like what were you doing? What were you tuning on the rig? So I think it's cool that you have sort of a lot of, the tattoos are a great idea for kind of, you know, making that visible on the flesh and like being able to bring it back game after game. So there's just so much rich stuff here. So really just wanted to point out some of those integrations that are already happening in the book.
You nailed it. You really nailed it, Wythe. As far as like, so speed is the primary, you know, driving source for the writers. But there's a variety of different types of writers. So we have a type of writer called writer scavengers who just didn't make the cut. And they're just out there trying to survive out in the basin. And they might be part of a support crew. They might actually be trying to connive a way to actually, you know, get back into the hunt. Or they might just be doing their own thing, you know, just trying to like, you know, find their little scams here or there, or run a little business, or, you know, this type of thing. So there's a lot of option for characters, not just to, you know, be particularly driven by, you know, attaining the speed state, but there's, you know, different layers of different options in there as well. Yeah.
And I think as well, to your point, you mentioned, you know, baking all of that together and thinking about the mechanics, the players, the lore, and baking all that. my thing is, so my writing partner Emily is the big concept person. She's the one that's like, what if they, you know, and I'm like, okay, I hear you, I like it. Let's see how we can make that work within the lore that we have, and let's make it function, and let's make it so that it makes sense. And I'm what we call the continuity fantasy guy. Like, I like to make sure, you know, so an example of that is the Unsettled, who are like the Fremen of our kind of world. Their magic requires them to touch things, basically. They need to still be able to communicate, and we had decided that they communicate through sign language. So if you're in combat and you need to touch things, then communication is going to be a little bit hard. So I did some research. I found a sign language that was ASL that we wanted to use as our language, which is a military sign language and designed to be used with one hand. So you can be communicating with one hand, and you can then be manipulating magic with the other hand. So that's the type of like continuity that I like to have in my world of like, it needs to make sense. It needs to make sense, because if it doesn't make sense, that's where I usually am the one sat at a D&D table poking plot holes in my head, you know, but not saying them out loud and being like, okay. And I want to make sure that we don't have those kinds of things, and can add, you know, wide diversity to cultures. Because again, if you look at, you know, take a guild, you know, because that's, or a faction or whatever, if that faction doesn't have like a history, you know, a hierarchy, a how the people operate, what their common things are, what do they believe in, what do they support, you know, what's a unifying factor here, then there's just no depth to it. It's just a name for a GM to use to be like, you encountered the faction of angels, you know, and you're like, cool, awesome. Now, do they have anything of any depth? Maybe, I don't know. But that's a part that I also love baking in, is that level of like you said, tattoos, like Tom said, scavengers, you know, place where they can, you know, some people rest at the ship graveyard, but most people are driving around the whole time. So how are they getting their water? Where are they getting their water if they're driving all the time? Oh, they're aligned with the Kai, who do have a consistent water source, you know, so on and so forth. So that's, you know, that's kind of how I operate in that space.
Yeah, I love that point about factions. I mean, that's something that Wythe has in Stillfleet, and that I have also in Dance Macabre. But you know, in like the GMing section, there's just a little bit that's like all factions are political, meaning that they have desires, that they have, you know, methods for getting to their end goal, all of that good stuff. Just trying to build that kind of richness into them. It does bring me to just an observation, really, but there's an interesting kind of like developmental through line I've noticed, which is that, you know, Sky Zephyrs is kind of setting agnostic. You can kind of drop it in wherever. Same thing with Wandering Tavern to a degree, but then that kind of ballooned in its own setting, even though you can kind of transport it between different, you know, fantasy or steampunk or Renaissance, whatever medievalism worlds out there. And it seems like, you know, Scorched Basin kind of takes that another step further, right? It's a location that we could drop into any place, but it does have these like specific species and factions and vehicle rules and all of that kind of stuff. So I'm just curious, like, you know, as we've been developing all of these different properties, different projects over time, you know, is that something that you've kind of consciously thought about developing it out as like, how can we kind of expand this into its own setting? Or is that just kind of the natural flow of these projects for you?
It's a great question, dude. We're asking ourselves the exact same question at the moment, going into whatever our next project is going to be. And I think, you know, those questions around what do we want to do? What do we find interesting? What is the space missing that we would want to see in the space? And then like a final question in that is, do we feel like that is something that people would even give a shit about? And you know, we have to consider of whether, you know, that's something that we feel like there's an audience out there for. You know, we're learning at the moment that Studio Ghibli, you know, our Wandering Tavern project is way more popular than Dune and Mad Max. Now, don't get me wrong, you know, that's just how it is, because a lot of people, you know, it's been around for so long and people have been consuming it, and it's, you know, a household love and name. And so it's one of those that you look at those different IPs that we kind of align ourselves with in some ways, and the things that inspire us, because, you know, I'm one of those people who I love there's a quote from Brendan Lee Mulligan that is, a GM is only as good as the obscure references they make. And to me, that sings, because it's about combining all the beautiful things that you have and making something new and wonderful that hasn't been seen before. And so going into the next one, I'm not sure what we're going to choose. And coming into this one, the natural progression from Sky Zephyrs to Wandering Tavern made total sense. You know, we did Sky Zephyrs. Why not continue in the same place? Wandering Tavern. We love Studio Ghibli. We love, you know, like Howl's Moving Castle and you know, the bathhouse in Spirited Away kind of vibe. You know, it gives, you know, that kind of energy. Immortal Engines is another one that kind of comes to mind when you see that. So it made sense. Going into Scorched Basin, it was a complete left turn. We had never talked about, you know, other than excitedly being like, oh my God, could you imagine if we got to do like desert, and it's like Tatooine and Jakku and Dune and Mad Max and all this, you know, and we were excitedly talking about it, but we had never been like, oh, that's obviously the next progressionary step is to go from skies to dirt. You know, that makes so much, you know. So there was no clear progression there. It was just we asked the community, as Tom said, what they kind of were interested in. They said they were looking for desert stuff. We went along that path and have come here to where we are. And you know, it's honestly, it's the one we're most proud of. It's got the most stuff in it. It's the most innovative that we've been in terms of, you know, as far as TTRPG books go. We've added a soundtrack to this book. We've added NPC voiceovers, as you guys know. We have added, you know, languages that have typable fonts, but will also teach you accessibility within using Morse code in ASL. You know, we've got alchemy systems, magic systems, land vehicle mechanics, 7 different types of art running throughout the book, you know, 4 or 5 different layout styles that run throughout the book as well, that change depending on what you're reading. We have notes that tell an actual story. So if you read all the notes chronologically throughout the book, you get told this story of this person who came to the basin and encountered this crazy adventure throughout the book as you're kind of going. And we've got recipes. We've got recipes from each faction and location, so you can cook food for your players at your table. And to us, the big logical step that we made wasn't so much the setting itself, but was more the innovation that we wanted to do with the book. Was like, cool, whatever we do next, we want to try and make a book that hasn't been seen in the TTRPG space before. Something that's fresh, has some layers to it, as well as also being, you know, the thing that people love, recognize, and feel comfortable in as well.
Well, I definitely want to ask about some of those things, because you're bringing up a couple elements. And so one is the sort of voiceover work, which gets into the collaboration. And I think there's 2 pieces there. One is the kind of creative model of like you're working with not just your own team, your creative team is like a family and your friends, but you have these other creators coming in and kind of bringing their views and bringing literally their voices with the sort of NPC voiceovers. You also have this interesting kind of business model where you're working with folks and sort of having a network and doing it kind of very indie. So those are really appealing to me. And I just think it'd be interesting for the listeners to hear. But to start off, can you say a little about some of those collaborations? Anyone you want to shout out, or just how did you decide, like, yeah, instead of just writing a book, I'm going to ask like 100 people or however many to sort of lend their voices, bring the game to life? You know, I don't know if it was, you know, feedback. I'm not sure exactly how it got started, because we got in touch, you know, a month or 2 ago. So we're sort of coming at the tail end, I think, of this.
Dude, I love that question, because it's like when you say like, oh, did you just reach out to 100 people? It sounds crazy. It sounds like it sounds like something a crazy person would do. And here we are having done exactly that. So you explain, because this is your area.
I think it all started with us going a traditional path with Kickstarters, and the traditional path is to kind of explore Facebook and understand what it takes to put ads onto Facebook, and whether you want to do static ads or video ads or that type of thing, and then just feed money into it and cross your fingers and hope that converts into a Kickstarter with a lot of backers and a lot of pledges, right? That's the traditional path. And we did that with Sky Zephyrs, and it was fine. But there's also an element of not really being sure how much detailed tracking there is from Facebook leads that are going into Kickstarters, right? There's a little bit of vagueness in that connection. So that always made me feel uncomfortable. And then just generally, we're kind of more on the, a little bit a little bit on the non-traditional side, and when we look at Facebook and Meta and Google and how some of the creators in the YouTube space were really suffering at the time and not really, the algorithm wasn't kind to them. And so we're thinking, well, we're giving our money to these big corporations, and we understand why, because we see other people giving their money to big corporations. And hey, by the way, it works. It kind of works. Facebook somehow finds people to back your project, and they do a decent job with that. But we had a conversation. We're like, is there a different way to do this? Like, could we, as we're seeing really, established old school YouTube creators in the TTRPG space reaching out to their communities and saying, I'm suffering. I can't do this anymore. Like, I can't justify the time I'm putting into this channel anymore because the algorithm is just killing me. And so I guess that was the inception of us saying, like, okay, well, let's see if we can unplug all of that budget that we're giving to the likes of Meta and Google and redistribute that into our ecosystem TTRPG creators, and just keep it, keep that same $100 is going around the TTRPG space, and Zuckerberg doesn't get a piece of it, right? That's basically it. And that was the inception of our community first project. And then from there, we were like, well, how else can we get the community to understand who we are, what we're all about, but also to buy into this theory of we can do this just within the community. And I was talking to someone else in our space, right, in this third-party publishing space. And I told them about this idea of us getting perhaps some creators to voice NPCs that exist in Scorched Basin, so that when you're reading the book, you come across a QR code when an NPC is introduced or a tribe is introduced, and the reader will scan that QR code and it'll take them to YouTube, to a playlist, and they'll be able to hear the voice of what that NPC might sound like. So we started thinking about, all right, well, if we can get enough creators on board with that, I'm not sure how they'll accept wanting to do voiceovers or just participating in our Kickstarter as a community project. What would that look like? And I said to this third-party publisher, look, we're going to try to get 100 creators on board. And it's going to be a wide swath of creators, from folks that are just starting out in their YouTube channels to others that have been established for a very long time and have very strong name recognition. And this person said to me, well, that's a great idea, Tom. Good luck with it. I think you guys are going to do just great. But for us, that wouldn't work because it's not scalable. And I said, okay, that makes sense. We're going to try it, and we're going to see how scalable it is. So that was the journey of trying to get 100 creators on board. And we have more. We have probably close to 120 creators on board. And some of them have just stepped into the space and are just starting. So we don't say no to anyone. If someone wants to do it, come on board. You're part of the community, come on board. But we also have, very established names on board that have said, you know what, I've gotten to a certain place in my journey as a creator, and I feel like I want to, reach back and contribute to this cause, so to speak. And that was it. It was just this community-driven cause that we wanted to see if it would work. Yeah.
And I think we've learned a lot from this process, and we've learned a lot over the short time that the Kickstarter has been out. And there's certain things that we will probably change going into the next one, in terms of we want to make sure that for the smaller creators who are struggling to maybe get the views on the content that they want to then be able to convert or things like that, we want to try and come up with other strategies of how we can help those people as well, and give them a little bit more and things like that. So we're hoping that going into the next one, we can, refine our process even more. If that does mean using some ads so that we can give even more back to the community from those ads and things like that, we're not sure, but we're just trying to work out the path to make sure that we can give as much back to the community as possible, because, you know, at this point, so many creators that we love are not able to do it because of YouTube algorithm either shitting out or not paying them enough, or, you know, the current climate in America just killing people's Kickstarters, because Americans are currently afraid to spend, you know, spare money due to, you know, the serious financial burdens that are being spread across there. And, you know, America is one of the biggest markets for TTRPGs in the world. You know, so it is one of those of like, we want to just make sure that we can give back to as many of the creators as possible. And, you know, this was our shot in the dark this time. We're going to learn and be even better next time for both us and the creators. You know, we're going to come back even stronger with each time we do this, you know, and hopefully lift up more people, and also hopefully financially help a few more people as well across the board, with how we refine and keep this process kind of going, basically.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of Kickstarter, you know, Wythe said kind of at the top, y'all are in the midst of a Kickstarter campaign at the moment. We're about to launch into another one. So, you know, we're all in the trenches right now. But I was curious, you know, for folks who are listening, who, you know, want to go through this process, who want to self-publish or go through Kickstarter to fund something, you know, do you have any advice? Do you have any thoughts about the process kind of in general that you could share with us?
Yeah, I think that there's a very easy piece of advice that Tom and I would say off the rip, which is just don't
do it.
Just don't. It's one of those where it's such an anxiety-inducing experience doing a Kickstarter, guys. Like, it's such a wild roller coaster of, there's days where you feel like you just can't get out of bed because you're just like, this is just not going the way we thought, and other days where it's, you know, going incredibly well and you're blown away, and you know, it's just such an absolute roller coaster. And I think the one thing that I would say consistently for us that's been a big pickup has been all the voiceovers that everyone's done, all the effort that people put in there. We've laughed, we've cried, we've, you know, giggled, we've, you know, all the bits to all these incredible things that people are saying about Scorched Basin, all the amazing like goof videos that people are making, reviews that people are doing, like they're all incredible. The effort has been insane. And I think my advice would be, if you're going into this, it would be, make sure that you have invested enough money beforehand to ensure that the outcome at the other end doesn't bankrupt you. That, you know,
you're making decisions beforehand.
Yeah, be smart about whether you want to do physical products, because the shipping, the climate of, you know, the world, the economy is going to affect all of that kind of stuff. Whether you want, where your warehouse is going to be in the world so you can ship to different places, and how that will affect the prices of your shipping across the world. You know, think about promotion and promotional material that you've got on your Kickstarter page. How much of this promotional material, so that I'm not doubling up spending money, can actually be used in the book or is from the book itself, so that I'm, you know, not, it's things like that you need to just be really cautious about when you're going into a Kickstarter, because a lot of people see, you know, again, and these people are incredible at what they do, but shout to like D&D Shorts, who did Ryoku's Guide to the Yokai Realms. An incredible Kickstarter that absolutely crushed it. I think it made 4 to 6 million or something like that, somewhere in that range. And people assume that if you just do a Kickstarter, you can be D&D Shorts and make 4 to 6 million. And the answer is, you just cannot. Like, it won't happen unless you are someone who has 400, 500,000 subscribers on YouTube and an army of other people that are behind you, and, you know, the resources to spend on advertising, to spend on, you know, even just doing upfront costs, to be like, oh, say Critical Role, can you run an ad for us? Which, you know, to run an ad on Critical Role is redonkulously expensive. You know, it's crazy. So I think it's really consider why you want to run a Kickstarter. Ask yourself, is Kickstarter the way? And why am I running a Kickstarter? Then ask yourself, what else could I do to prepare for that? Make sure that you're in the right place and you're ready to go with it. And then the final thing is, do up your belt tight, you know, tighten up your laces, pull up your your shorts, you know, whatever it is, and just get ready for the ride. And just know that all the work that you've done up until that point doesn't end when you launch. You have to keep grinding that entire month or that entire amount of time that the Kickstarter is running for. And then when it's done, then you got to grind on fulfillment. But up until that point, you can take a 2 to 3 week breather before the funds from the Kickstarter land, where you can take a moment. But you need to be hell for leather that whole time and just giving it everything you've absolutely got, realistically.
I would add one other thing, which is just, I think I remember before we launched our first Kickstarter, I had this almost dreamlike expectation of like, oh, I'm going to do a Kickstarter, and could it actually be the one, right? Could it actually do the thing?
Is it going to be the Cosmere RPG and make 15 million?
I think the point is, now after having done 2 and we're in the middle of our 3rd one, is you will get out of your Kickstarter exactly what you put into it. So if you're putting minimum amount of marketing just because you're trying to create the product, then I promise you're going to get out of it almost exactly what you've put into it. If you've put in a tremendous amount of effort across, the marketing and the actual product itself, it will reflect. It will reflect in the Kickstarter. I mean, there's external factors. There's world economy, and there's things like what's happening across, let's say wars and other stuff that tighten people's belts up a little bit for discretionary spending. But in general, it's not going to be magic. Just because you're on the platform doesn't mean if you build it, they will come. Not true. But if you do a good job, if you really, really grind and try to find ways to get new eyes onto your product, then they'll probably try to support it to the degree of eyes that you've gotten on the product. And that's basically it. There's no mystery.
Yeah.
That's kind of it.
Yeah, I'd agree with all the things you said. I think that's really good advice. We've done a number ourselves, and I think there's different scales, right? And you could say, well, this one I only need, I'm not, I don't have a huge following yet. I don't want to risk a lot financially. I'm not going to do ads. Yeah. I only need a couple $1,000 to do a nice zine, right, or something, and that's very achievable. And totally. I think we've both been in the realm of, a different order of magnitude where you need, say, $10,000 or something minimum, right? You're trying to raise 20, 30 because you have labor costs. You put in time. Maybe you're doing ads. And then there's the next then there's a level in the 100,000s, and then there's of course the millions, which I don't know that you guys, we certainly have not got to that point of having to. It would be a good problem to have, right? Oh my God, we have made $5 million. What do we do, right? And we talked with Mark Diaz-Truman, who's a game designer I really like at Magpie Games, and he was talking about that with like having been successful and having a company, but then with Avatar: The Last Airbender RPG, that was suddenly like, oh man, I have to hire people, right? I like immediately have to hire like whatever he said. I forget if it was an accountant and 10 staff. It's like it's a different league. So I think there are scales, and I think all the advice you gave is great. But I do think it's, not to frighten people away. Like it's a tough time right now because of external factors, right? Separate from RPGs. Yeah. People clearly love these games, despite how great video games have gotten. People still want to connect, and we still have this thesis on our team, at least, that it's a great way to connect and have really serious, interesting discussions, which are fun and silly. It'll always be fun and silly with your friends, but it's also a great way to kind of really be other and explore being with other kinds of people and meet people. It's a great way to make friends. It's really needed in this time of doom scrolling. Yeah. So I think that thesis feels strong regardless of this fall. Who knows what's going to happen the next year politically in the UK and the US, but I think it's an interesting time for y'all and for us to be doing Kickstarters. And to your point, Tom, I think it's really well said. You get in what you get out what you put in, and some of that has to do with capital and ad dollars. But if you don't have any money for ads, you can still do a lot of smart marketing moves. You can try to appeal to streamers, get people to play, just play yourself, stream yourself, and have clips show off like, look, this is fun. This is a rule that's fun and innovation. Here's the art, as you said, art that you're going to use it for marketing. And we've, trial and error, learned some of this stuff ourselves through, a similar number. It's like something you ladder up. And I think for first time Kickstarter producers, it's like, probably you're not going to do all those things exactly right. It's just, okay, survive, do it again. Don't bet your house on a cool zine. Get the cool zine made and use it to do a bigger thing next time and learn a little more. And you can make it a part of a business model. I think the other thing I would add to what you said is it's hard, I think, to do it as your only source of revenue unless you're already, like you said, like D&D Shorts, like mega famous. If you're that famous, maybe that works. And that's how you make money. Once a year, you do a big Kickstarter, twice a year. For us, it's like, we had to go with more retail as well, and we have to do some other things because it's like, it doesn't sustain, to do once or twice a year. It's just not enough money, right? Like even if you do a good job and you don't sort of lose your shirt. So I think that's a whole nother problem of like, it's a lot of skills to learn. It's hard to be good at marketing a Kickstarter. It's also hard to then be like completely, basically unrelated how do I get stores to carry my game? How, do I go to local, do I go to cons and sell at cons? So there's a lot, but I will say they are learnable skills, and these platforms are very imperfect, but Kickstarter, it takes 5%, but they're probably one of the least bad, I would say, having, between Meta, Google, Twitch, YouTube, all these things that we rely on as small businesses. Kickstarter is one of the more chill. I mean, they're just some guys in Brooklyn. Totally. You can email them; they'll email you back. Like, they take 5%. That's it. That's the whole business model. Do whatever you want. Don't be a dick. They take 5%. It's not that bad. Compared to, Meta is like logging into, trying to figure out how as a small business to place an ad requires like weeks of work. And that is like the biggest hurdle to overcome. It's just learning how to use their arcane Web 1.0 engineered by demons from Byzantium to be Byzantine, like backend,
Yeah. Well, I think if we're talking to people that are considering their first Kickstarter, I think you would probably want to de-risk this as much as possible. So go digital and start out with legitimately what you think the budget would be to produce this product. And then if you hit the budget, then you've got resources to produce this digital product. If you don't, then you haven't lost anything. You haven't really, you may have started a little bit with some artwork and some bits and pieces of it, but that you still have enough, emotional space and financial space to live to fight another day. I think the problem is when people go too big, too fast with a physical product and commitments to things that are outside of, I need 1,000 units, I need 1,000 backers to kind of break even. Well, if you have 50 and you still have to fulfill for those 50, and that, let's say it's a $10 per unit price now has gone up to $24 per unit, you're in trouble, right? That's where you start going sideways. So if you're thinking about it, start slow, do something digital, think about actually what the goal would be to mostly get it home. And if you hit the goal, then you're there, right? You've pretty much done it. If you don't, then that's fair.
Print is attainable. I mean, Mixam does a good job. Mixam in the United States can print a zine. You can get a few $100 and print some zines and sell them, and you will make money. It's not going to be as much as offset printing in China, but it is good quality and it is doable. And it works both ways. Set up your file to be a nice PDF that you can also just upload to Mixam and hit print, right?
Yeah.
And then it's de-risking it in that you don't have to commit to thousands of copies. You can do a few hundred. So let's say you raise $600. You're going to spend that. You're going to get 100 copies, 200 copies, depending on the size, the format, and you can sell them. And if you fulfill the ones that people pledged for, obviously, but then you might have some left over and you can sell those, and that might be the beginning of the kernel of something. At least get you through the experience if you are interested in print, in kind of trying it out, right? Because the file setup, there might be things that come up in that process if you've never created a spine. That's a whole thing. What is the width of my book? That's a whole another arcane process. That's lore that you can acquire. You can roll your reason, score, and figure out. But yeah, you're right. Digital nowadays is a lot easier, and more people are probably digital native. With between Canva and GIMP, there's these great free products. Many people know Adobe. So for file setup, that's going to be sort of the quickest way forward.
And I think the other thing is, like, I harken back to Robert Rodriguez or Quentin Tarantino, where film school students are like, okay, so, I'm in film school for the next 3 years and you give me some guidance on what I should do. And the response usually is, go make a film right now. Like, go just on your phone, just do it, right? And so the equivalent is, if you're interested in Kickstarters, even if you do a small one, that is a big part of the education is just to do one, to understand how Kickstarter works, to understand I need to set up a bank account. What does pre-launch mean? How many pre-launch, you start getting the lingo, you start getting, all of the different machinations of what the journey of a Kickstarter is. You can't read that in a book. You have to kind of go through that journey. So why not start with something small? Just do it instead of, you can download as much of, what we're talking about as you want, but at some point you're going to have to jump. And my suggestion is jump with as little risk as possible and give it a go. See what happens. Don't lose your shirt, but get in there and see what you can do.
Yeah, tear it up.
Tear it up.
Let it rip.
Baby.
Let it rip. Very, very Basher themed. Yeah, I love the energy.
Yeah,
Familia.
it's on point. The Familia.
Well, yeah. We're at right about an hour. Chris, do you have some other questions? Do we want to ask anything else before we kind of turn to just really the pitch of like, Scorched Basin is really great. We're a little biased because we're very, very minimally involved. We're doing some cool kind of crystal karaoke goblin character VO. It's just
Can't wait to see.
among with many other creators, these kind of you
Dude,
can
that's
listen
the
to
best description of the dough flock we've ever had. That's fucking
I read
hilarious,
what you
dude.
sent and thought this is for us. Chris and I
Yeah,
in
it's
real
for
life
us.
are friends, and we fucking love karaoke. Right? I think it's fair to say that's like one of our number one kind of hobby things.
For sure.
So we were like, wait, I can be a karaoke goblin? This is definitely I'm choosing this.
Sign me up. Sign me up. Where do I
That's
sign?
incredible. Oh, I
So-
can't wait to tell Emily that they're called karaoke goblins. Now she's gonna love that, dude.
Run with
That's
it.
so up her street.
So before we give you the mic to kind of tell everyone about Scorched Basin and how great it is, Chris, any other sort of substantive questions? Anything you want to ask we haven't gotten to that I've forgotten to ask?
No, I don't think I have anything else. I was going to ask a joke question of who is homie and who is the dude, but I know that we previously talked about that. And I don't want to be annoying with it. But,
No. Our standard answer is there's an answer that's public out there, but it is within one of our early podcasts. We have what 70 or 80 podcasts.
Yeah.
So you only have to scroll through about 2,000-3,000 hours.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's only a couple days of your life to go find the
And
answer,
it's
but
light-
it's out there.
light lift.
Yeah, exactly. If you like One Piece, then we've got a new challenge for you. Go find out who's the homie and who's the dude.
That's great. That's
Well, it's
one
like
of those
what is the one piece? Who is the homie? Who is the dude?
Exactly.
It's all connected.
Can't we stop all these Squid Games? Why do we have to fight these Star Wars?
Stop. That's hilarious. That's so
Go see a Star War.
Go see Star Wars. Well, so
No,
everyone should
yeah.
scroll through hundreds of hours of content to figure out which of you is whom.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But other than that, yeah, I guess.
I have
yeah,
a question for you guys. So you guys have been doing this show for ages, and you're doing Kickstarters, and you're trying to. How are you guys finding just the path that you guys are on? Is it something that you guys are like loving doing? Are you in the throes of like, is this something that you guys do as like a hobby? Is it more goof? How serious do you guys feel about it? And just like, how are you finding the space? Because, the TTRPG space is super unique. It is super niche, but, we have a pretty, beautiful community across the board. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's some dark corners, but we stay away from those. So how are you guys finding it? How's it been on your guys' end?
Yeah, I mean, it's been good. I think, Wythe and I both take it pretty seriously. We have jobs outside of this. Wythe works in advertising. I'm a tattoo artist as kind of day job stuff.
Sick.
You're talking about the advertising bit.
Yeah, the advertising. Yeah. Oh, tattoo artist.
Yeah.
That's whack. Advertising. Yes. No. What's your like signature style? Are you like American traditional or like?
Yeah, I do.
Like,
I do
what's your vibe?
fine line black work is how
Hell
it's
yeah.
usually
Yeah,
described.
yeah.
So like, I do a lot of like scientific illustrations and
Cool.
stuff kind of that nature.
That's awesome.
But yeah. I mean, I don't know. Wythe, how are we finding the space?
Yeah,
I think
that's
it's
yeah.
very generative and very supportive. But it's also, it's a struggle based on the kind of exterior factors that we've already touched upon, whether it's politics at large, the rise of, arguably the rise of technofeudalism in the United States, of all that good stuff, and just tariffs and all of that.
Yeah.
But I mean, the community is still, as y'all mentioned earlier, very strong. And like Wythe said, in spite of kind of external factors, people still want to engage with these products and jump into these worlds. And so, I think on the community side, at least, it's been a really good response, really strong response, especially as we're moving into our Kickstarter for Dance Macabre, for my game. It's been really exciting to just see people respond to it, and to like, I think for me, I'm able to maintain any kind of energy that I have just based off of that response.
Yeah.
but yeah, it's a slog, but it's a labor of love.
Yeah. We talked about it in the last actually episode that just came out with my friends from grad school who just finally published novels they've been working on forever, and we were talking about indie publishing. That was the sort of theme. They set up an indie publishing company in Brooklyn for fiction, and we obviously are indie publishers in Queens and Brooklyn for RPGs. And we were talking about that experience. It kind of parallels what's different about the kinds of marketing, the kinds of writing, keeping yourself engaged. TTRPGs are, I think, a little more collaborative. At least the basic ad unit, like having worked my whole life in advertising in the life sciences. I mean, I'm a science fiction writer. I write about the future of food and medicine specifically, and that's the kind of ads I'm doing are for biopharma companies. They're talking about the future of health, and so it's all about understanding where that's going and working with artists. I'm always a writer. I never do the art, and it's interesting how it's replicated with RPGs. There's this minimal unit of like an artist and a writer. I think is kind of fun, and I really enjoy that. I don't love my day job, but I love working with artists as a writer and coming up with ideas that can't quite be just words or just pictures. You kind of need to compose something out of them, and I think it's a different puzzle, but it's very related. So we were having this conversation about novels anyway and how it's different. It's not visual as much. And, something that came up was how do you sustain the energy and how do you get across the last mile when it feels like years are going and you're not seeing the financial returns and you have to work the day job? And what is the goal, right? Is the goal to ultimately give up the day job or become comfortable with some sort of split? And I think people will, first of all, have to listen to that episode because it's a long one with many different voices, but it's also like, choose your own adventure. There isn't a right path, and it is so much shaped by external circumstances. So without going on a long, this can be a whole other episode, Chris, the sort of orthodox Marxist read on like small business in the United States now in the age of technofeudalism and platform economy, without going on and on about it, it has changed. I think if we had gotten in, I'm in my 40s, I was deep in the OSR as a GM, forever GM, writing stuff. I just didn't publish my own work until Micrognetta was like, hey, you should publish Stillfleet. And I was like, oh yeah, I could just probably do that. Other people seem to be doing that. So it was kind of an aha moment. If I'd done it 10 years earlier, I don't know that I would still be working a day job. I'd like to think it would have caught on, we'd been able to sort of get more of a following. I think because we started at the same time that so many other people had that same insight of like, oh yeah, it's actually not that hard to use these platforms. Again, all the quibbles with them aside, serious quibbles, and this is before generative AI, right? It's like, oh, I'll just come on and like publish my thing and maybe do a Kickstarter, see if I get some money, see if I can print it. It's like a lot of people did well enough that I think there was that kind of teasing factor of like, maybe this could this be a thing? Could this be a job? And I think, Chris, not to speak for you, but I think we've been in a similar space of like, it feels like it's going well. People seem enthused. The games are really, really fun. We play them at cons and with dozens and dozens of strangers, and everyone loves them. And then it's like, okay, but it's not a job. It's still kind of in that liminal space. So to answer your question, I think we're very serious about making a job, but what does that look like is not totally clear. One thing we said with our friend George Bicker from 3 Sales, which is another great indie company that does great, basically like cool leftist historical games like we make and play. He said, hey, the problem is you're in the United States, right? You're in New York in the United States. You're in the most expensive place in a country that's falling apart. If you're in the UK, you have healthcare. You don't have to worry about it. It's a lot easier to start a small business and be like, well, at least I'm not literally gonna, like, I don't have to worry about insurance. I have to work the day job because I have insurance for myself and my wife. And if I lost that job, we would be screwed. Like, we'd have to move to Thailand immediately, where my wife is from, and where we could get healthcare for $1. So
I was gonna be like, wild. That was that was a crazy leap. It's like, we moved to fucking China.
No, that's the thing. So,
that makes a lot more sense now that your wife's from
everyone can answer for themselves, but my plan is to work the day job, run this company, see where it goes, and then if the worst happens at the political level, we're going to move to another country, which is also a right-wing country, but it's the land of smiles, right? It's a place where, again, there's ups and downs everywhere you go. And that's very specific to like, it's all so contingent, and there's so much privilege built in, even just the randomness. That was not a decision when I was dating to like marry someone from a different country, but we have the ability to do that. So I think so much of running a small business in the United States, to me, with a very specific lens, feels like these totally random things. You have to really do what's called in business a SWOT analysis, SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. You have to say for yourself, right? We're really, really good at writing and graphic design and art. We're really bad in a way at marketing, even though we work in advertising. It's like no one ever taught me how to run a company or market anything. They taught me, I know how to write websites, right? I don't know how to like I said, I didn't know how to log into Meta. Like logging into Meta was this Kafkan like, are you give us money, but we're not going to tell you how to spend it. You have to figure it out. So it's mind blowing how like that there's all these skills when you run a small business you have to acquire. And I think we're seeing that like the monetization it's not impossible. It's just kind of random. To your point, it's not like you do a Kickstarter and you get $1 million. You do a Kickstarter and you might not lose money, and that's great. But it doesn't necessarily mean you've funded a self-sustaining business. And when I've talked to my other friend who runs a furniture store, he's like, what you should have done is have a bakery or a bar, something that prints money, where you just have income and you can predict and you go up and down. When you start publishing luxury goods, books, the market is always going to be a little more random. I think it's just a word of warning, and it's the kind of question of like, how much do you really care about learning the business side versus I just want to see some zines get printed because they're fucking sick. And I'm willing, there's always the outside chance you become Cosmere, Avatar, whatever. It's unlikely, but if you can de-risk it, I think Tom, you said it really, really well. If you can de-risk it, you have a good idea, you can see it in digital life or in print for modest, a good run that's not going to break the bank. It's a great way to Kickstarter and these kinds of communities. They're great communities. They tend to be more, more leftist, more queer friendly. I know there's like OSR, grognard, right-wing types, but we honestly don't see them or hear from them that much, which seems I would have thought we'd get trolled more. We got trolled recently for one of our ads that Chris drew like a feminine looking character with chainmail and an axe, and it's a game about basically a zombie apocalypse, and the troll was like, cool girl boss game. And I was like, that's what you take from this ad about a zombie apocalypse.
And you're goddamn right, it's a cool girl boss.
I
stand on that.
Gender isn't really mentioned. Like, we show people of different genders that just don't like. It's not a game with there's not a rom-com element. It's a game about fucking fighting zombies. Anyway, long answer to your question, but thanks for asking. I really appreciate you. Guys, I know you have a limited time, but please, can you pitch us on Scorched Basin? Can you tell the listeners where to pick it up, how to pick it up? I'll drop the link in the chat. We'll put it in the show notes, but you're the creators. It really looks awesome. It honestly is very fun.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, dude, it's the thing we're most proud of. We have put hours of our lives into it. It is a desert TTRPG setting that is system agnostic and inspired by Mad Max and Dune. It is going to be one of the most innovative books we've seen in the space. There's going to be a soundtrack. There's going to be voiceovers. There's going to be all those languages, magic system, alchemy system, vehicle system, 5 factions, all manner of stuff to take your games to the next level. Every part of it is modular. So you like a weather effect? Cool, take that. You like an NPC? Cool, include that in your game. Whatever it might be, take it apart. Pull it all together, use all of it, use a couple of things from it, whatever it might be. But you'll find something that you love in there. And otherwise, guys, we just appreciate you guys taking the time out of our lives, out of your lives to come and support us, and all these incredible people who have supported us and put effort into what we're doing and this whole space. So I would say to anyone, if you are interested in the Scorched Basin, we almost guarantee that one of your favorite creators has participated in adding a voice line or something like that, and are likely doing some sort of work with us. So go to their channel, go through their link, follow through them, and support those people. If you're listening to this, then you love this channel, you love these amazing people, so go support through their link, because they're going to get half of whatever they bring in, and you're going to be supporting these guys just as much as you're supporting Hattie and Homie and the Dude over here. So other than that, we are Homie and the Dude pretty much everywhere, or Hat D pretty much everywhere. And then Scorched Basin is on Kickstarter if you want to go and Google it and check it out, have a look at the page or whatever else. But that's kind of it. We're father and son team from the UK who just love that we get to do this on a daily basis, hang out with each other, write crazy shit, and have an amazing time. So thanks for everything, guys. We seriously appreciate you taking the time out of your days to do this with us today.
Yeah, likewise. Really appreciate y'all's insights and just being able to chat about all your projects. It's all super cool. Scorched Basin looks amazing, like Wythe said.
Thanks,
and we'll have links for everything in the show notes, of course. So folks listening, you can check stuff out there. But in the interim, of course, go to homieandthedude.com, check out the Kickstarter for Scorched Basin, support, do all the cool stuff. Be a cool human and support cool projects.
And wherever you're listening to
giving
this,
$1 can help a creator.
guys, follow as well. Follow these amazing guys. Subscribe if it's on that. Bad. I don't know what all the other verbs are. Do the thing where you get to listen to this more regularly and support Why We Roll, because this is awesome. You guys are incredible interviewers, great questions, and you guys, I'm sure based on who you are, you guys make incredible stuff as well. So just thanks for all of it, guys. Yeah, and good luck on the Kickstarter. We're going to be watching it, dude, and we're going to be back in. We're going to be getting in there as one of those early bird, get in there nice and quick at the beginning. So we're looking forward to it. Super looking forward to it.
Yeah, no, we backed Scorched Basin, and we will. It'd be great at some point to play a game together after our campaigns when time allows. So we'll have to do. We can do it again
when we can all breathe.
Yeah, exactly. It'd be really cool to do some sort of Studio Ghibli. There's a flying train and there's an apocalypse, or I don't know. We'll figure it out.
We figure something.
The Wandering Tavern crashes into your world, and that becomes the Scorched Basin.
That's it. Crashes into medieval Constantinople.
That's it. Yeah,
or the far future.
Let's mash them together.
Far future.
For now, everyone check out @Homie and the Dude and check out Scorched Basin on Kickstarter, currently funding. We'll try to get this out, Chris. We'll figure that out, but currently funding it for the stream, and when you listen to the podcast, probably still currently funding. It's great work. And with that, I think this has been Why We Roll with Homie and the Dude, Tom and Bodhi. Thanks a lot. Chris, thank you so much. We're going to end the stream.
Thank you. Bye, y'all.
Bye.